Hi everyone and a warm welcome to For the Love of Comics, where in this episode I'm going to step away from talking about the comics themselves and share with you a little bit on how I clean and really maintain my comics bookshelves. Those of you who've been following along with our complete collection videos, in which we're taking a multi-episode, multi-shelf tour of all our comics, know that most of my comics are in the form of bound volumes, not single issues. And you also know that I keep them on bare shelves, by which I mean they're not behind glass or behind doors or even for the most in any plastic bags. And I go a little bit into the reasons why in the introduction video to our comic store. But what that choice of not having them behind glass or in cupboards actually means is that I have to deal with a lot of dust accumulation, even more so than we normally do in a place like India, which is quite a lot anyway. So I thought I'd share with you in this video 2 or 3 tips on how I keep dust to a minimum, as well as 2 or 3 tips on how I clean my shelves in order to maintain my collection with the aesthetic appeal that I want, which is open and available but still clean and undamaged by dust. What I'm going to talk about here isn't really stuff of my own creation. It's things I've cobbled together from a lot of advice that I've found, as well as trial and error over a lifetime of collecting books and well over a decade of collecting comics seriously. And as always, I would also like to get into a little bit of the logic or the rationale that I'm employing in making the choices that I am. As always, I'd love to hear from you if you have any tips or tricks for me, or any techniques or systems that you follow, or if you just want to share your general approach to collecting and displaying comics. So let's get started with how I clean and maintain my comics bookshelves. First, I'd like to share with you a couple of tips in keeping your shelves dust-free as far as possible. I do recommend having slightly deep shelves, by which I mean the books are placed in a recessed area, so they're not right at the edge. This is where the maximum dust buildup happens, and by leaving it empty, you allow the dust to gather on the shelf, which is more easily wiped clean than the books. However, you don't want to push them all the way to the back, because pulling them out might damage them. You should never pull them out by the top edge of the spine. That will stress and eventually tear them. What you want to do is push the books around them back a little bit and pull the one out that you want. So you want a little bit of room at the back to allow for this kind of maneuvering, but for the most, leave as much empty space on the shelf in front of the books as you can. Tip number 2 is also related to this. Because you want that space easily accessed and easy to clean, I recommend having no knickknacks or showpieces or toys or action figures on the shelves in front of your books. Now, this is a completely personal choice. I know that many people like to decorate their bookshelves with curios and souvenirs or toys, action figures, what have you. I myself am a fan of Lego, and what you don't see in these videos is above each of my bookshelves is a Lego set. But I don't place anything in front of the books themselves, first of all, because that makes getting to books and getting books out from behind them quite difficult, and that access is very important to me, as I've explained in other videos, but also because they're dust magnets, and the small shapes and crevices tend to gather a lot more dust and are much harder to clean than a flat surface like a shelf. In any case, I find books on a shelf to be very attractive by themselves. I don't really think they need embellishment in the form of other decorative items, but there's also a practical reason to have only books on your shelf. Another tip is I like to keep books of the same height together, because again, all the dust falls evenly and can be dusted and cleaned off evenly rather than in layers. By keeping these books recessed and having this area free, whether it's while you're housekeeping or doing something else or just walking by, if you have a dust cloth nearby, one simple swipe keeps it clean. And for regular maintenance, doing that every now and then is more than enough. I'd like to note that when you are wiping these shelves down on a regular basis with the book still over there, always use a dry cloth. I know that a damp cloth is tempting to use because of the way it picks the dust up, but you don't want a damp cloth touching the shelves at the same time as the books are still on there. You don't want that cloth accidentally touching the books. The biggest danger to books or print paper products is not fire, it's water. Dampness and moisture, just a little bit, can be extremely damaging. So you want to be very careful when using damp cloth. I would never use damp cloth on a shelf without having rid it of books first, and I will only put the books back after I'm sure that the shelves are bone dry. Once every 2 or 3 months, although to be perfectly honest, sometimes it becomes 5 or 6 months, I do like to take the books off the shelf and give it a more thorough cleaning. The regular basis dusting that I described isn't really getting to the dust on top of the books or behind them, or the dust accumulating in the nooks and crannies. And also, when you wipe down with a dry cloth, you're essentially just displacing the dust. It goes up in the air, and most of the time it comes right back down on the shelves in a little while. What you do want to be doing is getting rid of the dust instead of just throwing it up in the air in order to settle down. For this, I recommend 2 devices that use HEPA filters. So I use an air purifier to trap dust particles in the air. In a place like New Delhi, unfortunately, it's sort of a necessity anyway. But when I'm cleaning bookshelves in particular, I bring out this little DIY air purifier, which is essentially a table fan with the blades reversed and a HEPA filter strapped to it that you can buy online for a fraction of the price that more fancy air purifiers cost you. And I have this turned on when I'm dusting the shelves so that any dust that I'm throwing up in the air has a chance of being trapped in that HEPA filter. For the same reasons, I use a very powerful vacuum cleaner with a HEPA filter. In a place like India, I have found that if your vacuum cleaner isn't extremely powerful, you might as well not be using a vacuum cleaner at all. Sweeping and mopping is more effective, and the level of dust trapping that I want to do is only possible with a HEPA filter. The normal filters just leave too much dust behind. So because of the power and the filter of this vacuum cleaner, I depend on that for being my primary bookshelf cleaner. Now, quick note about the vacuum cleaner attachments. The regular brush or crevice tools that the vacuum cleaner comes with is fine for upholstery and furniture like the shelves themselves, but you definitely don't want to be using something so coarse and rough and frankly dirty on books themselves. So for that, I recommend one of these, which is a micro vacuum attachment kit. These are pretty easy to find. They come with 3 or 4 different attachments, and basically it's things you can attach to your vacuum cleaner to clean smaller items. So this is the tool that I use to vacuum the dust off my books, especially the spines and the tops. So now that I have the air purifier running and the vacuum cleaner ready to go, what I do is empty the shelves one at a time, taking the books out and quickly vacuuming the tops off them and putting them aside on a side table. When the shelf is completely empty, I vacuum the crevices and all around it, and then wipe it down with a slightly damp cloth. Once I'm sure the shelf is dry, I put the books back one by one, gently wiping them down with a dry cloth if needed. Once I'm done with one shelf, then I move on to the second one and I do the exact same thing and then restock with dusted books. As everyone is fond of saying of everything, it's not rocket science, but it does help to have the right equipment. I think the HEPA filters on the air purifier as well as the vacuum cleaner are a big help for me. The vacuum cleaner being a powerful one is particularly important for me because I actually have dust allergies, and too much dust affects not just my sinuses but also my skin. So on cleaning days, I can sometimes resemble a man in a hazmat suit. The micro vacuum attachments again help me keep tops and spines, the most vulnerable parts of books clean. But I think the most important thing for me is the avoidance of clutter on your bookshelf. It's very tempting to let a whole bunch of things pile up, but as I said, it not only interferes with your reading because you're less likely to reach for a book that's behind 2 or 3 different levels of things, but it also multiplies the number of surfaces that dust can stick to and makes that dust more difficult to clean. And the harder something is, the less likely you are to do it. So by maintaining some sort of simplicity, I find I'm able to indulge my tastes of having open and always accessible bookshelves. In a very small nutshell, that's a glimpse of how I clean and maintain my shelves. I hope you enjoyed this video. Leave me a like if you did, and I'd love to know what you think, either of my techniques or how you approach cleaning your shelves. This has been For the Love of Comics. Thank you as always for watching, and I'll see you at the next video.